Joel Wynn again, Songs of a True White Brother. In this section I'm going to talk about a particular writer. I want to be very systematic, and I want to on occasion give people some books, because a lot of the ideas that I'm going to be sharing with you are born in the thinking of other people. Some of it's my own research, but I've been deeply influenced obviously by Rudolf Steiner, but there's another fellow I want to introduce you to, those of you who like to get and read books that are going to inspire you. And I mentioned him earlier. This is a man by the name of Owen Barfield, who lived for most of the 20th century. He was born around 1900 and died in 1997, somewhere in there. He was a member of a group that is called the Inklings, and the Inklings included some English writers, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Owen Barfield, and a guy named Charles Williams, I think, and some other people. And they met during the 20s and the 30s. You can look it up on the internet. I think probably Wikipedia has an entry on it. And they read to each other their stuff. I think they met in Tolkien's rooms at Oxford or something like that. But in any event, they influenced each other, and Owen Barfield was part of that. And he also was a student of Rudolf Steiner, but he carved his own path, and a lot of anthroposophists don't know what to do with him because he was extraordinarily brilliant. I'll just show you some of his books. This is Poetic Diction, A Study in Meaning. It's about language and meaning, and when we get into thinking and language and this stuff, you'll get that. This is History in English Words. When we talk about the evolution of consciousness, that's a book that's very important in that. There were people who were, you might say, anthroposophists before Rudolf Steiner existed. One of which was Emerson, and there's lots of good reasons to read Emerson. I already mentioned him. Another one was Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Here's Barfield's book, What Coleridge Thought. This book is called Worlds Apart. It's a very, very interesting book. It's a fascinating book because Barfield was what we would call a polymath in a certain kind of way. He understood so many things, and he was able to bring them into a unity that it's kind of disturbing when you read him to realize sort of how stupid you are. But it's wonderful that his genius existed. And in Worlds Apart, he creates a dialogue between a bunch of characters over a weekend in England, a couple weekends maybe. And one of them is sort of him, a solicitor with philological interests. Barfield was a lawyer of the kind that's called a solicitor in England. That is, he didn't go before in courts. A lawyer that goes in courts in England is called a barrister. He did contracts and things like that. But he also had an interest in language. That is why he's called a solicitor with philological English interests. Another was a character who's a professor of historical theology and ethics. Another character is a young man employed at a rocket research station. Another is a professor of physical science. Another is a retired schoolmaster. Another is a biologist engaged in research work. There's a linguistic philosopher and a psychiatrist. Now it's interesting that Barfield knows the point of view of all these different kinds of people, and he creates in this book a dialogue between them, and what they discover is they can't hardly talk to each other. They don't speak the same language. The assumptions that live in psychiatry, for example, are not the assumptions that live in linguistic philosophy or biology, and it's very, very difficult for them to talk to each other and get anywhere. Now, here's another book, History, Guilt, and Habit. Now think about those things. History, Guilt, and Habit. He actually talked about those. Barfield's one of the wisest people of our current time. Now, my favorite Barfield book, in a way, is this one. It's short, it's concise, it actually consists of the written form of lectures that Barfield delivered in America. It's called Speaker's Meaning. And sometimes you can call it the history of meaning and the meaning of history. It's an amazing book. And the one I'm going to talk about mostly today, and I'm just going to talk about certain aspects of it, certain ideas in it. And that's this book, which is called Saving the Appearances, A Study in Idolatry. And I'm not sure I'll be able to have time to do all I want to do with it, so it might run over into something else. But this is a very important book by Owen Barfield. I would read that if you want to do the work that goes on with doing something like that. In any event, let's talk a little bit about something that's in the beginning of that book, Saving the Appearances. He talks about two things that he sort of considers as problems of the, might say, the paradigm in which we swim, of Western civilization. And he talks about something he calls the assumption, and then he talks about something he calls the omission. Now, the assumption basically is, and this is kind of everywhere, and it's that people in the past had the same kind of insides that we have. That is, there's no evolution of consciousness. Consciousness is the same today as it was in the time of the Egyptians. Now, the fact about the assumption is that once you ask the question of whether that's true or not, all the evidence is that it's not true. You actually look at the evidence about the nature of consciousness of the people that, say, just even in the scholastics. The interior life and the minds of the scholastics in the 12th and 13th century were not the same as we are today. And Barfield talks about that in his different writings. Now, let's see, I'm going to be out of time here, so I'm going to pause and start up again because Barfield's points are very important, and I want to get into them a little more deeply. So hang on, I'll be right back.